We're told big changes are happening in schools when it comes to transgender students. Something that a lot of people are trying to wrap their heads around today, right? Schools are really trying to figure out how they deal with everything. And there are changes coming. Rita Walker is on the line right now. Rita, good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Good. So tell me what's coming. And by the way, what is your position? Where are you calling from?
I'm calling from Syracuse, New York. I am a limited permit psychotherapist as well as a social work practitioner. I work for CMY Family Marriage and Family Therapy Place in North Syracuse, and I also work for Donna Dalal Fern, and she's in DeWitt.
Okay, got it. And changes are coming. What's happening?
Well, it depends. I mean, what are we talking about? I know that originally I was interviewed a couple of weeks ago about changes coming in Albany in terms of kiddos reaffirming as a different gender in order to play sports. Is that what you're referring to?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think it really depends on the situation. I know that they're looking at different rules and regulations in terms of letting school districts make those decisions, and then at some point they're going to be making their own state regulations that schools have to follow. So I think, they're kind of baby-stepping their way through this whole process. I don't think there's a quick fix to any of it.
What do we say? What do you say when somebody says, listen, we didn't deal with this stuff years ago. We didn't have to deal with this stuff. This transgender stuff wasn't around years ago. I don't know what's happening today. What do you say to that?
It's funny that you say that because the trans population has been around forever.
Right. Well, I understand that, but you do know there are people that say just what I said to you. That's how they feel.
Sure. And you know what? I always tell people, I'm not going to argue with the way you feel. You're going to feel the way you want to feel. The only thing that we're doing as a community is making sure that you understand.
Right.
I'm not saying that you have to agree. You can disagree. It's a free country, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But we're just asking that you understand because these kiddos are really going through a lot of struggles and depression and anxiety, and the suicide rate is well over 40, 50, even 60% in some communities.
So
And
when you say it existed before, it's just, it existed, but you remain silent about it. You didn't, it's not something that you were able to, and that's where the suicide rates and the depression and the consequences probably were far greater years ago.
Yes, there wasn't a lot of support because a lot of it has to do with psychoeducation. You don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
So when you don't know those things, you live in fear and you're overwhelmed and you just figure, well, no one cares, so I'll just go away and remain quiet.
What is your thought on having individual districts, make a decision before the state gets involved? We had talked about a situation where in Texas there was a born as a female, was transitioning to a male, was on basically steroids, all kinds of hormones, and was competing in some state wrestling tournament.
Right, I read that.
Right. So, do you agree that it should be handled district by district? You would obviously get all different opinions and inconsistency across the state, I should say.
Well, I think it really depends. I think it's a very, very touchy subject, and I think it's really, it's up to how the school districts want to handle it. I think it's a systemic issue. I don't think it's just one minute area that should be, talked about. I think it should involve the community. I think it should involve the parents. And obviously it should involve the child.
Yeah.
I don't think it's something that, we talked about originally in my original interview with CNY about having a say, should the parents have the end-all, be-all say? And I said, well, there's kind of an authoritative tone to that. So I think it should involve everyone. But I also think about the rest of the population that these kids go to school with.
Right.
So
kids are probably a lot better in dealing with this than adults and politicians.
Somewhat.
Yeah.
Again, it depends. If you're in a rural kind of community, it's going to be a little different.
Yeah. And it's funny, too, because when oftentimes people will say, well, kids, they oftentimes are politically what their parents are. So,
Right.
and the same thing would happen here in these social issues. If you're not taught to be someone who's open-minded to different things, then you probably wouldn't be. So we're talking about, and I think it's confusing for people. It is confusing for people, and that has. Do you agree that also has to be considered? That someone who is 70 years old, who's never experienced this, it's hard for them to understand transgender versus gay versus. There are many different classifications. It's confusing.
It is confusing. I don't think the issue is not being able to understand. I think it's just I think it's more what you just said. It's very confusing. I actually have a client who is 72 and is trans. So, and I have them as young as 10, 11, and 12 years old. So, it becomes, again, a situation of psychoeducating and making the public aware, because we weren't even talking about this 5, 10 years ago, in terms of getting it out into the public, in terms of having them be aware. And I think part of what you said, too, being gay or lesbian or bi, it's safe. People understand it. It's
right.
Either you are or you aren't.
Right.
But being trans is like, well, wait a minute, you want to be different, or what does that mean? So it's scary to people.
Right. And in some cases, there's a guy that likes to dress up, dress in drag.
Right.
Yet he still wants to stay with his wife. He's still heterosexual. Very difficult for people to wrap their heads around. But I think we just have to walk away and say, I'm not required to understand what you're going through. I just should be tolerant of it, right?
Well, I don't know about walking away and not understanding. I think tolerance begets understanding.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
You know what I mean? I don't think it's that black and white. I just think there's a tolerance to it. I think there's an understanding to it. But again, I'm not going to tell someone if they feel that, they're against it. I'm not going to try to talk them into feeling, pro for it.
Right.
So it's knowing that these people do exist. This population is very prevalent. More than people know.
How often do you run into a child that is no longer a child, maybe now a teen, and it was, we're talking about the school accepting, we're talking about students and friends and coworkers, whatever. How often do you come across somebody who's grown up and it was their parents that weren't tolerant?
Oh, I've had several cases with that, but then I've had a lot of cases that are super supportive, too.
Right,
so,
right.
It really runs the gamut. Every case is different, and that's what I tell every parent. Every story, every scenario of a trans person is different from the next. No two are the like.
Right.
So you, in your profession as a psychotherapist, you've obviously studied the brain extensively. Talk about this from a scientific standpoint. To a lot of people who are trans, in their minds, they are the sex that they have in their minds, not necessarily the anatomy that they were born with. Is that correct?
Correct.
So in essence, they were born with a female brain, but they, in some cases, or if it were a female to male situation, they have a male's body, but they were born with a female brain.
Correct.
Well, that's,
and so over time, that brain, if they have more of the female component in the brain, that's going to sit with them and say, geez, I'm born with male genitalia, but inside I identify. I want to wear dresses. I want to walk around as a female like my girlfriends. I don't feel masculine or whatever that connotation is. And it is, and that's why I tell parents, it is definitely a brain cognitive issue. There
is a, it's probably a touchy area, but nature versus nurture. I got to tell you, I'm a male, and, in college, I don't know what it is. They're heterosexual. Those two girls are heterosexual, but they're kissing, and the guys are loving it. So there's social involved in this as well. I'm stumbling through this. Can you talk about that just a little bit?
Well, what do you mean? What's your exact question?
I guess my question is, how much of this is nature versus nurture? And Is it possible is it possible, because I would say nurture or social issues would be what is happening when those two girls who are heterosexual are kissing each other and having a relationship to impress the guys.
So are you saying that when a trans person is younger, they can grow out of it? Is that what you're meaning?
I don't know how in the world you could have ever taken that out of what I said. I mean, not even close. What in the hell are you talking about?
When we talk about nature versus nurture, this is what I mean.
Well, because I just asked the question. Because let me give you an example. Someone will say, well, let me tell you something. If that was my kid, he wouldn't have been playing with Barbie dolls, and it'd have been a Matchbox car and G.I. Joe, and that'd have been the end of it, and this would never have happened.
Well, let me tell you something. You know what? You can tell a kid not to play with certain dolls that are not indicative of their gender, but right. I'm going to let you know right now, they're going to do what they want to do.
I understand that.
They're going to do what they want to do and need to do to survive. I've had adolescents that have known since the age of 2, 3, and 4 years old. Right, they just knew. So in terms of your other question with two girls, I don't even think about the nature versus nurture in that aspect. I think that's just discovery. I think a lot of kids, a lot of teenagers go through that in some aspects, in some respects. So, every situation's different.
And finally, I want to ask this other awkward question. One more awkward one for you, Rita. Come on, we can do this. We're going to get through this. And this awkward is, what about the parent who creates confusion? So I knew a situation where I almost think this mother wanted her kid to be gay. And this is like the reverse of what any other kid would. Normally you hear the story of the child who's gay, and the parents, beat him into submission to be, you are a man, you're going to act like a man, and that's the end of it. But in this case, it almost seemed as if the mother was trying to nurture a child who was gay, and I think it caused a great deal of confusion in this child who ultimately, today, as an adult, is heterosexual. Can you tackle that one? That's a doozy, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very interesting case, and I really can't comment on that only because I don't know much about it, and that's one area that I've never, had, to
crazy.
Work with. And that might be, to be honest with you, that's not a child issue. That sounds like a mommy issue.
Yeah, like the mom needs some psychotherapy.
Yeah.
Oh, you are correct.
That's a mommy issue. That's not a child issue.
Oh, Rita, if we could talk. Like freely, really freely. All right. Well, listen, I think at the end of the day, this was a little awkward in the beginning, but I really think talking this out is so important today.
Yes, absolutely, for sure.
And making sure your kids are at the very least tolerant and open-minded to something that might not seem normal to them.
Correct.
Okay, cool. If people have questions, maybe there's a parent out there listening right now that's saying, I just need somebody to talk to.
Yes, absolutely. Reach out, and, you can always give out my information as well.
Well, could you tell us the phone number or website and all that?
Yep, my phone number is 315-374-7210. And just to add to this conversation, I have a non-for-profit organization that works with chest binders for those kiddos who are transitioning from female to male. And these binders are free, and they're new, and I give them out to the public as needed.
All right. And our apologies, we had a producer change, and I had no idea what we were talking about. So we were able to pull this off. I think we did okay. And Rita, thank you so much.
You got it. Have a great day.
All right, thanks. Quick break. We'll come right back.